Rick is so quick and so funny. And he's like, oh no, he's like, I'm not. You should see the guys at work. They're so much funnier than me. I would love to just be a little fly on the wall, you know, and listen. But sometimes I don't get, like when he's around his besties, his fellow officers, like they're in their own little world and they just joke one after the other. And it's like, you know, you feel like the third wheel. Hello, I'm Kristen, and I am so excited to chat with you today about how my husband has changed since becoming a police officer. I have been a police wife for 9 years. I run Heels and Holster, which is mostly Instagram page and blog, and now I started this YouTube channel to make longer videos with really practical tips for you if you are dating a cop or a police wife yourself. And on my Instagram page, we have an amazing community, so definitely follow me there if you are feeling kind of alone in this life, which I totally was at the beginning as well, but you are so not alone. We are there for you, and that is why I make this content, to help you out. So I also have a book that I know you would love. It is a devotional. It has 42 stories, 10 years of me dating my officer on and off, and then the last 9 years of our marriage, 42 stories from our actual marriage and our growth moments that are relatable to other wives and girlfriends of police officers and law enforcement officers. And definitely check that out, as well as Bible verses and prayers in there too. Okay, so the first way that, let me list the ways that my husband has changed, is that he sees the world through a darker lens. So a practical example of this is that when we moved over here where we live in LA, I love Mexican food, and I was like, let's go to this one restaurant. And we drove by there so much, and he was like, I don't know. He's like, and he just a lot of times he doesn't want to tell me. He's not much of a talker, and he was like, you know, always late at night, there's a ton of cars there, and I think it's like where people go to meet the ladies, like a prostitution ring, you might say, or like an escort service there or something like that. And I was like, how do you know? Okay, so I'll tell you that it's taken me time to trust him. Like over time, I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, why do you see the world through this lens that you do? And at first I thought like he's just being negative, you know, because he sees so many negative things. But over time, I have learned to trust him a little bit more, that, you know, he sees these little details that we don't see. And I live in this happy rainbow world, and we're kind of okay with that. I mean, I don't totally, because I learned so much from him, but I do feel like he doesn't like bring too much home, that I'm always scared and paranoid and stuff like that. By the way, I used to call him paranoid. I really try not to, because I've learned that it's more realistic than being paranoid at this point. But he's always like, you know, if something is off, it probably is off. And that really does help me to have more confidence to kind of go with my instinct. And so if you are in a place where your spouse or boyfriend is really like seeming to be paranoid, try not to call him that, because I learned my lesson the hard way on that. And just kind of ask him questions of like, can you tell me more about like, what are the details here that you're seeing that are off, or something like that. Just try to understand him or her, because it will really help you guys out in your relationship. So the second thing is that your spouse or boyfriend may get in better shape physically, because they have to do so much physical stuff that I feel like a lot of times we don't see. A lot of times we think of officers like sitting in their car, standing around, as Rick and I like to joke, but they literally are like wrestling people. They are literally jumping over fences. I have a funny story about that I love, because I'm like a women empowerment kind of person. So Rick was saying there was a call on the celebrity in LA at his house that maybe like his alarm went off, and so they went to do like a well check and like, or a check of the house and see if like anyone was burglarizing it. And he said there was like a few guys with him. There were like 2 cars. So there was 3 men officers and 1 female. And he said there was a big like wall in front of the house, and they don't have time to like wait for the owner to come and unlock the door. And like, they don't want the owner there just in case someone's there, right? So they have to jump the fence to kind of go to where they need to go, or jump the wall, a brick wall. And Rick says the three guys like kind of questioned and like went all slow over it. And he says the girl just like just jumped over it really quick, and it's kind of funny. I love that. I'm like, you go girl. Like, I love female officers. I always joke about being jealous of them when they hang out with my officer all day on Instagram, but in reality, it's always comedy, and I really have so much respect for women. Like, you guys rock and you're so strong. So, okay. So a lot of times we don't really, like, we might see this, I guess, on movies or shows, but I feel like a lot of times we see more of like detective work kind of stuff being portrayed and not so much the physical. So your spouse or boyfriend may get in better shape physically and be working out a lot, and that's going to take time away from you guys. That has been something that has really been hard for me to adjust to over time, but now I fully embrace it and I support Rick working out. If I know he's in good shape, I know he does jujitsu and he does CrossFit. If I know that he's in good shape, like those nights when I'm sleeping and maybe I that little worry comes in the back of my mind, then I know, like, okay, he knows what he's doing out there. Like, he's been trained well and he continues to train physically to stay in shape, and that helps me. So I hope that that helps you, and definitely encourage your spouse or boyfriend to stay in shape. There is an awesome resource I will link below called Adopt a Cop Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or BJJ. And they are a nonprofit, and they will pay $50 of a gym fee every month for law enforcement officers, which is awesome. So I will link that below, just for 1 year. So, but hey, it's money, it's better than nothing. And Rick has been a part of that program this last year. I think we're coming up to the end, but it's awesome. The next one is that your officer might want some more downtime and like to be home more and just chill. So I feel like that comes from their like working so many hours. They're working shift work, they're working weird hours, like their sleep is always kind of off. And also they're in like hypervigilance, and maybe when they're home, they can actually relax as much as possible, right? So I tend to be the more social one in the relationship. I always feel like there is one. And so I try my best not to schedule like too much on the days off, like that Rick and I share, for us to go do together, like as a family, because I tend to want to like get out of the house and like do fun stuff or invite people over. But I don't invite people over probably as much as I would, because I know like this is Rick's safe, quiet space. It's not always quiet because we have two crazy boys who are age 5 and 7, if you happen to be new. But I feel like it's a safe space for him. So we have people over, but not like, we have family over maybe every weekend or every other weekend, but friends and stuff like maybe once a month. I mean, it's not like a ton. Plus we have a small townhouse, so that kind of helps, but we do not, when we do invite people over, we just pack them in here. We don't really mind that it's small. That's like not the reason. So that's just something to be conscious of and kind of find your balance. Like, what I have found is that if there's going to be a busy like weekend when Rick is off of like kids activities, play dates, birthday parties, stuff like that, I will tell him like, if you don't want to come, it's okay. And then also in a past video, I've talked about this, but he will give me time as well. Like, I usually go grocery shopping on my own. If I know like he's gonna have a weekend off and with us, then I will go grocery shopping on my own and like have a little bit of peace, a little time. And if I need to clean the house, I'll tell him like, I need you to hang out with the boys so I can clean the house, stuff like that. So that's lovely. That they might want added security. So we have a Ring doorbell. We love our Ring doorbell, or any kind of like option of that, because honestly, it's really great for me. It's security for us. So your spouse or boyfriend might want more security for you to keep you safe. So our Ring doorbell, like if Rick has worked mostly night shift or swing shifts throughout our marriage. And so he's gone like maybe at night when we go to bed to like 3, 4, 5 a.m. Who knows what time, given overtime. And he is basically watching us. He's keeping an eye on us because we have the Ring on our patio and our front door. And so it's lovely. He gets a notification, and usually in the middle of the night, our neighborhood's pretty quiet. So if there is some kind of activity, he'll check it, see what's going on. One time he did call the police on the neighbors, which is kind of funny. I was pregnant, and I also had a 2-year-old. I think Maverick was 2. And our neighbor like totally knew I was pregnant. She was a single mom. She was awesome. And she happened to be going through a lot, and she was like just awake in the middle of the night. And Maverick, I was trying to sleep train him. Like, he was going through this regression of like getting out of his bed and wanting to hang out with me. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna have a baby in a couple months. I need you to stay in your bed. I need you to like sleep normal. And so I was just letting him cry for a little bit. It's gonna sound really harsh. Okay, that is the hardest thing for me. I was probably crying too, but I knew I needed to set boundaries. So I just want to say that out loud, because sleep training is not for everybody, and it really wasn't for me. But Maverick is somebody that if I could do it for a couple nights and just show him like, this is what I need, he will change his behavior. And so I just knew like I needed to do that for him. So anyway, he's crying, and that night the windows were open. It must have been like a nice night, so she could hear, and she just came over to the front door and was like checking on me. But he couldn't see who it was because it's dark. We didn't have the patio light on. And so he calls our local police to do like a well check, because he works like 45 minutes away. And they came, they didn't see anything or anything like that, but I felt like so embarrassed for our neighbor. But it does show that he's keeping an eye on us, which is lovely. Other things that Rick has asked us to do is like use a PO box instead of our mailing address. And that's not really what we see as a security measure, but it is, because he said like some people get upset with him, and they'll get connections through the DMV to like find where you live. And so he was like, let's just use a PO box. So we kind of use both, honestly. Like we do have mail come to our regular mail, but we try to use the PO box for everything that we can. So those are definitely some things. So a question that sometimes people ask is like, does being a police officer affect your personal life? And kind of your personality. So, yes, I think so. I think that it's funny because a lot of people will say like they don't get like the vibe from Rick that he's a law enforcement officer until I say like, oh, he works far away, like he works at night, stuff like that. Then they'll start to like get the hint if they have someone in their family that is law enforcement or fire or something like that. And I do think one thing that I have seen, because I knew Rick 10 years before we got married, and I think part of that dating time he was law enforcement, but before that he wasn't when I first met him for years. And I do think like they have less emotions, at least for Rick. Like he's just kind of stays like this general neutral, like not too happy, not too sad or anything. Like there's like a neutral. And I do think that helps them to deal with like all the chaos that they see, is to just kind of be neutral. So I told Rick, like, you don't get too excited about stuff. And he's like, yeah, I guess not. Like, so I don't know. I do think that that comes with the territory. Not to say he's not excited. He just doesn't really show it like the way I would, of course, but maybe that's a man thing too, guy thing. The next thing regarding like the security thing is that they're less trusting. I would say like more skeptical of like things, places, people, stuff like that. And like Rick has had the same 2, 3, maybe good friends who he met in the academy, has known a long time, and that's it. Like, yeah, and I mean, he'll work with new guys and maybe they'll develop like a little bit of an acquaintance or friendship, but it takes him a long time to really develop trust for people. And I think that again just comes with the territory. The next thing is dark humor. So I try to share this a lot, like just humor and comedy in general, like on my Instagram. The reason I started it back in 2021 was because like there was so much negativity in the world, and I just thought I need an outlet of like humor. And Rick is so quick and so funny, and he's like, oh no, he's like, I'm not. You should see the guys at work. They're so much funnier than me. I would love to just be a little fly on the wall, you know, and listen. But sometimes I don't get, like when he's around with his besties, his fellow officers, like they're in their own little world and they just joke one after the other. And it's like, you know, you feel like the third wheel. So, but I love it when he's around them. I learn a lot because he really does not talk a ton about work. I feel like have been married 9 years, like know him 19 years. I really just don't. He's been on for 16 years now, I think. I don't have that many stories because he really doesn't share them. So I love it when he's around his friends. So that's like, if you're kind of struggling, if you have someone that you're dating or a husband like I do that doesn't talk that much, like get him around his friends, because he might open up more and like you might be able to see a different side of him through that experience. So So the dark humor, sometimes like if Rick will say like he can kind of see he's like pushing it too much with me, because sometimes it's like, whoa, that's a lot, that's a bit much. That is joking and humor, having a sense of humor is literally, guys, a resiliency factor. And so it's a part of what they need to do to like get through their day. So just remember that, like, even if it kind of pushes you over the edge and it's like too much sometimes, like me. So I do joke with Rick all the time, and like I try to be pretty funny on my Instagram. I try, but I think even I need to be better at like understanding that that's just part of like him processing whatever's going on at work. He might not like the things that he used to like. So I don't know that Rick ever loved like crowds. So this is one that I do hear from other law enforcement officer wives, is like their spouses are not interested in going to Disneyland, Disney World, any of those kinds of places because of the crowds, or like fairs, stuff like that. We just went to a fair this past weekend for like, it was kind of like a Christmassy event, but it was also a fair, and it happened to be raining in LA, which it hardly ever rains. And we were like, we're just gonna go anyway. Just brought coats with like hoods ready, you know, for it. And it really just barely drizzled on us. And there was nobody there. It was amazing because there's like a ton, millions of people live in LA. So whenever you go anywhere, like you're ready for lines, you're ready for a crowd. But I mean, it was lovely. So something that we do, because I know Rick is sensitive to that, is like he likes to go on a little bit of the off season to things like Disneyland or things like that with our kids, or weekdays, the off season, anything that you could do to like have a little less crowds, because yeah, it can be like, because of their hypervigilance, they like to be aware of everything, can be really stressful. Like even going to the movies, which I know a lot of people don't even go anymore after COVID, especially, I feel like, but Rick likes to sit in a certain space, like near the aisle, near the back, so that he can kind of see the whole place, which is understandable given like the things that happen in our country with movie theaters. So I do think like we just have to be sensitive, and after a while you're gonna get used to those little intricate details of things that really help your officer to relax a little bit more. And then this past week I had a funny reel on my Instagram where we're talking about how like police wives, we always face with our back to the door because our officer needs to see the door. And one time Rick literally said this to me, and he was just joking. No, he wasn't joking, I should say. It sounded like a joke, but it wasn't. So I was sitting facing like the front door, and he's like, you know, if you're gonna sit there, you need to be prepared to shoot anyone that comes in the door. And I was like, okay, I'll move. So he's like, you always want to look calm, but be ready. So that's his mentality. It's definitely different than the average person, definitely different than mine, right? Like I'm just chilling in my house eating, but I will say that actually when he's not home, I face the door. Like I don't put my back to the door. So it's kind of funny. I guess I do it too. Like it feels normal to do that. So there might be things that they used to love, like going to concerts or something like that, and now they're like not as into it. Maybe it's super loud or it's stressful for them. And so just kind of know it's hard for me, like people in marriage, especially, like you're going to be together a lifetime, people are going to change. So it's not just stuff with the job, but other stuff as well. And recently, actually another funny story. So Rick, he told me that he didn't like a couple of foods, not because I made them, but just like he doesn't like them anymore. Like pot roast was one, and a specific cheese that he used to love on his lunches. And I was like, okay, the pot roast one was like one thing I could make that was sort of like everybody liked it in the family. I'm vegetarian, but I always make kind of like a similar dish, but on the sides. I would just make like veggies. It would just be like a boiled veggies and potato kind of thing with like the spices that I would put in the pot roast. And I was like, okay, but you know how I don't know if it's just me, but I have like 10 things that I cook for the family on a regular basis, and that was one of them. So I was like, okay, I have to process this for a minute because that's one less thing now I can make for the family that I know everybody loves, and it's kind of easy for me to adapt for being vegetarian as the only vegetarian in the household. And pretty soon I do want to make a video on like meal prepping and planning and how I deal with that and the different kinds of things I make, just in case that would be an interest of you. Let me know in the comments below. That would be awesome. But yeah, so even I struggle with like accepting. It has nothing to do with the job, just normal, just people change kind of thing. But The next thing is that our officers are never off duty, and they kind of struggle to relax, right? So that's why I think like being home more and like if they're comfortable in that environment, they can relax as much as possible there. I was just messaging last night with another police wife who was saying her officer really struggled with relaxing, like even at the spa, like couldn't fully relax at a spa. And I totally agree. It's kind of funny. I feel like Rick cannot, like, I've gotten him massages before because he had back surgery a couple years ago and really kind of struggled with that. I also want to tell that story on here, but that is in my book, so definitely check it out if you haven't. I tell that story in there, but he would always come home and I'm like, well, did you like it? And he's like, I don't know, it kind of hurt. I felt uncomfortable. I'm like, how? I'm like, you can tell them like if it's too hard or whatever, but I have never left a massage like that. Like I'm always like, oh, that was amazing, you know? So anyway, that is all that I have, you guys. I'm sure there are more, but I think that's pretty comprehensive on like my husband changed after becoming a police officer, or after becoming a cop. I believe these are the things that maybe all of them would have in common and are normal, and I truly hope that it was helpful. I am going to do a Q&A next week with a couple of questions I got from other wives, and I'm excited to do that, and I look forward to see you in that next video. Have a great day.